Good morning, good afternoon, Who Dat Nation. Brendan Boylan here with my guy, Bob Rose. Saints News Network pregame show. Week 3, the New Orleans Saints and the New England Patriots. I think the biggest question has been, which Saints team are we going to see in Week 3? Is it going to be the team from Week 1? Is it going to be the team from Week 2? But before we dive into all that, Bob, we got some really interesting injury news from both sides today.
Yeah, we sure do. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's keep our fingers crossed that it will be a happier ending than we experienced last week with our Saints in Carolina. But indeed, if you follow us, and you sure as heck should, then you probably saw John Hendricks' up-to-date inactive report, for the game. No real surprise. Eric McCoy is the only regular Saints player from week 1 to be on the inactive list. So Cesar Ruiz will probably get the start at center, with Calvin Throckmorton taking Ruiz's spot at right guard. But watch for Austin Reeder too. The Saints signed him, former Kansas City Chiefs starting center. Saints signed him about a week and a half ago, and they have him active for game day 2. So if the Saints experience some of the same offensive line issues that they did last week, don't be surprised to see some shuffling there. Defensively, the only thing that raised an eyebrow to me was Desmond Trufant is not active. Now we know Marshawn Lattimore is going to play, and Bradley Roby, Paulson, and Debo have both played very well. But I was a little bit surprised, Brendan, that they didn't want to go into this game with Trufant as cornerback depth. And then on the Patriots side, the two big names that I saw, right tackle Trent Brown is inactive for the Patriots. So I'm looking at you, Cam Jordan, and their leading sacker and one of their best edge rushers, Matt Ucci, is also inactive. So that's a bonus for pass protection for Jameis Winston, we hope.
Well, and that's a big thing. You said Cameron Jordan. I had mentioned in my podcast, the Who Dat discussion yesterday, that when I was talking about my X factors, my defensive X factor was going to be Cameron Jordan. And a lot of Saints Twitter has been upset with Cam and his performance this year. And you even go back to last season, only 6 sacks, though he got the Pro Bowl nod. You're not seeing Cameron Jordan get in the backfield and sack the quarterback like we're used to seeing. However, the double teams that he's attracting, how good he is in the run game, that does make up for it in some aspects. But you're getting to that point where you really need somebody to take over. And on this defensive line, there's been a lot of shuffling, a lot of injuries, suspension. There's so many things. So you're looking at Cameron Jordan. He's going to be playing a backup right tackle, 1v1 for majority of the day. So you're hoping Cam can get a sack or 2, right, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think Cam has played nearly as badly as what a lot of Saints Twitter is sort of crucifying him for right now. But you need a guy like Cam Jordan to be a difference maker as a pass rusher. He has gotten some disruption, especially against the run game, like you mentioned. He did pressure Rodgers on a few plays in the opening week. We're going to need that kind of pressure again. Peyton Turner had a wonderful debut, I thought. Mm-hmm. But with Marcus Davenport still being out, Tanoa Kpassagnon returns this week for the Saints defense, and I thought he played a whale of a game against Green Bay. So you need Kpassagnon to play well. I expect bigger things from Carl Granderson too. But Cam is the leader, one of the leaders of your defense, and the leader on that defensive line. You need him to set the tone, especially against the backup offensive lineman.
Yeah, and remember, he's not too far off of the Saints all-time sack record as well. That's something that's definitely within reach before the career is over. So you want to see those sack numbers continue to tick. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, last week without Kwan Alexander, obviously on IR, so he's going to be out not just today, but he's going to be out next week as well before he could even be potentially brought back into the Saints lineup. We saw Zach Bond struggle heavily in his debut, for lack of a better term, at his linebacker spot. Remember, he was an edge rusher coming out of college. But Pete Werner is going to be available today. Do you expect the Saints to give the second-round draft selection some time in the starting lineup today?
Yeah, I really do, Brendan. The book on Pete Werner coming out of Ohio State was his coverage abilities and his ability in space, and that's something that Zach Bond has struggled with. Zach is a fine athlete, don't get me wrong. It's just his inexperience, and that was that was really on display last week against Carolina. Not only on Christian McCaffrey coming out of the backfield, Christian makes a lot of linebackers look foolish, but even in coverage on the Panthers tight ends, particularly Dan Arnold. And I said it a couple times this week, when Dan Arnold has 3 catches for 55 yards against you, you know you've had an off day. So I certainly expect Demario Davis to be more heavily involved in the coverage packages, and definitely Pete Werner on obvious passing situations, because you have James White coming out of the backfield for New England. He is their biggest pass-catching threat and somebody that their pass offense revolves around. And the Patriots are going to run a lot of 2 tight end formations with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, both terrific athletes and very good receivers at the tight end position. So you need to bracket James White coming out of the backfield. I think we'll see that a lot with Davis and Warner. And I think that Dennis Allen is going to pair up Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and perhaps even one of his cornerbacks on those Patriots tight ends, particularly when they go into the slot.
I'm glad you mentioned C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a guy we had mentioned. Lattimore is going to be good to go. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is going to be good to go today as well. With that double tight end, I know it's a guy that you're not the biggest fan of, but could you see a guy like P.J. Williams get some serious snaps today, especially in some of those 2 tight end looks?
Yeah, I can. And when I mentioned the cornerback, you're not going to see Lattimore on Lattimore or probably Bradley Roby on a guy like Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry, but you could see P.J. Williams come into the game. PJ's more solid from the slot than he is as an outside corner, certainly. And Paulson Adebo is a real physical cornerback too. That's another guy I could see on one of the Patriots tight ends. If you're able to do that and able to do that with success, it means your outside corners, Roby and Lattimore, have to be on target with their man coverage, but it allows you to better bracket James White coming out of the backfield with your linebackers, so that way you don't have to use them on the tight ends.
Well, let's flip it to the offensive side of the ball. The New Orleans Saints, dismal performance last week against the Panthers, 120-something yards, the worst offensive performance in the Sean Payton era after what was a very successful week 1 against Green Bay. You're facing a pass defense that has been very good so far this season. Over the last couple seasons, the Patriots' pass defense has been among the best in football. And, of course, when you have one of the best defensive backs in all of football, it makes your life a little bit easier with Gilmore on the outside. They had 4 picks last week. I know it was Zach Wilson, a rookie guy that's still figuring out the league. But this is a ferocious pass defense. How do you think the Saints are going to be able to pick that apart? And how much of a role do you think Kenny Stills is going to play today in his return with the New Orleans Saints?
I actually think Kenny Stills could be in line for a big game. First and foremost, Callaway, Deontay Harris, they're still going to be your starters. And they're still going to get the lion's share of the snaps at the position. But Stills is a guy who could come in for a few snaps, maybe stretch the field, or even get him the ball in space underneath. And one of those receivers has to step forward. First of all, I respect the New England Patriots defense, mainly because of the man on the sidelines, Bill Belichick. He is going to design a lot of different exotic coverage schemes. But the Patriots, outside of Devin McCourty at free safety and J.C. Jackson, who I think is one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the NFL, they don't have any top-notch cover guys outside of J.C. They'll use Jalen Mills as their other cornerback. Jalen's a physical guy, but he has trouble with quick twitch receivers. So if they put J.C. on Callaway, then that gives the opportunity for Stills or Deontay Harris to make some plays against Jalen Mills, and they're going to have to. The wide receiving core, even in a 38-point effort against Green Bay, none of those wide receivers really stood out except for Deontay Harris in that long touchdown play. One of those guys need to step forward to make a consistent play to ease up that pass rush, because we saw Carolina last week. Carolina didn't hesitate a millisecond to send multiple defensive backs on several different blitzes, because they simply don't fear the Saints receiving corps. New Orleans has to make New England pay for that kind of pressure package, because I expect Belichick to come out of the locker room, blitzing in a way that Carolina did last week to Jameis Winston.
Well, Robert Clark just dropped a comment from YouTube saying Adam Troutman needs to step forward. That's a guy a lot of us were very high on. He was the Saints' most targeted receiver back in week 1. He had 6 targets against Green Bay. Still recovering from that injury, but has not jumped out like a lot of people thought he would. And Juwan Johnson really stole the show from the tight end spot in week 1. So what do you expect out of these tight ends? And maybe what can we expect from Adam Troutman as he progresses through year number 2?
Well, Troutman, just like the receiving core, and and I contend this continuously, a pass catcher has to step up. You prefer it to be a wide receiver, but if Troutman steps forward as your biggest pass catching threat, so be it. You need some kind of production from those guys to get a guy like Alvin Kamara a little less defensive attention. I love Juwan Johnson. I love the when they converted him to tight end, and he has a wonderful rapport with Jameis Winston. But he's not your every down tight end. Adam Troutman has the physicality to be your every down tight end, but he has to emerge as some sort of receiving threat other than just those quick dump offs, where he's actually able to reel the ball in. He has to make a play down the field. And again, if he or Johnson can do that kind of thing, that will free things up for not only Kamara, but those other Saints wide receivers where they may be the beneficiary of one-on-one coverage.
Well, we've talked enough about the wideouts. You mentioned Alvin Kamara. This is a Patriots defense that is going to hone in on the best player on the offensive side week in and week out. And you mentioned Bill Belichick and how great he has been over the course of his head coaching career in doing that. But you have a Patriots defense that was 26th against the run last year. They surrendered over are close to 150 yards last week to the Jets on the ground, nearly 5 yards per carry. I believe it was 4.9, right on the nose. So how can the Saints offensively in the run game create opportunities, not just for Kamara, but I do think tonight could be a really big game for Tony Jones Jr.
Not only Tony Jones Jr., Brendan, but Taysom Hill too. And I think that'll be key. Sean Payton is going to design different ways to try to get Kamara in space. And you and I have both said it repeatedly this week. We do expect Alvin to be more involved in the passing game, but for that to be successful, you still need another rushing threat behind that offensive line, and that's where Jones and/or Taysom Hill can come through. Flat out, the Saints' offensive line has to have a better performance than what they did in week 1. They need to establish control of the line of scrimmage immediately against the Patriots defense that has not only been vulnerable against the run this year so far, but that was by far their biggest team weakness last year too. So you can't physically run the ball on the Patriots. You just have to establish fast control of that line of scrimmage, which opens up play action opportunities and slows that pass rush. And again, gives your receivers another chance to make plays because the pass rush just isn't on Winston as quickly as Carolina's was. But you have to believe that the Saints are going to try to establish the run right off of the bat within their first series or two. A couple of gut punches to that Belichick defense. And then Peyton will certainly take it. If that's successful, Peyton will certainly be free to take more chances down the field as the game progresses.
Well, before we jump into some score predictions, last thing that I have for you is you saw a little bit of Jekyll Hyde when you talk about Jameis Winston from week 1 to week 2. Week 1 was the post-LASIK Jameis Winston, right? He could see clearly. He was throwing the ball, distributed it well. The passing yards numbers weren't high, but he was really effective when the Saints needed him to be. In week 2, you saw more of the forcing the ball, trying to make the play, whether that was because the Saints were behind or they couldn't run the ball effectively. Who knows? But at the end of the day, the week 2 Jameis Winston looked a lot more like the Tampa Bay Jameis Winston. How does Jameis and this offense look in week 3, and how does Sean Payton make sure Winston is set up for success to be the guy that they really do think he can be?
Well, again, it starts with the offensive line. And if New England's rush packages are similar to what Carolina's had so much success with last week, I think Sean will probably leave a guy like Adam Troutman in as a blocker a little bit more often, at least early in the game, to get Winston into a rhythm. Because there's no doubt Jameis needs to make better decisions with the football. But the Saints need to control the line of scrimmage and maintain balance for that to happen. And if that happens, another thing that's on Jameis, and this was a criticism I didn't see too many people point out within even the first game against Green Bay. Jameis needs to do a better job of getting the ball to a guy like Kamara in stride. Kamara is one of the most explosive offensive weapon in the league, in my opinion. And even against Green Bay, Kamara had a few receptions, but he had to kind of make them off balance. Jameis was a little bit off target. You don't quite see that chemistry there yet. And I think that, Sean Payton, Jameis Winston, and Alvin Kamara are going to work a lot harder to establish that in this game. Once you get a guy like Jameis Winston into a rhythm, he's not going to force as many unwise chances like we saw him take that pressure on his shoulders last week against Carolina.
Well, let's jump into some score predictions, Bob, and then following your score prediction, let everybody know where they can follow you on the World Wide Web. There it is, Bobby R2613. But what's your score prediction, and how do you think the Saints are going to bounce back or not bounce back from what was a awful showing in Week 2?
Well, first of all, this isn't your Drew Brees versus Tom Brady, Saints and Patriots, like we've become so accustomed to. So I believe that both teams are going to play it fairly close to the vest offensively and come out with extremely aggressive game plans. I think the Saints pass rush can really get to Mac Jones. And if they are successful in taking away James White, or at least limiting James White's effectiveness, that means Jones is going to have to take chances with his own receiving core that has been underwhelming up to this point. And I really love the Saints matchup against New England and the secondary there. So I think New Orleans has a distinct advantage defensively. And offensively, we go right back to, you got to establish control of the line of scrimmage, get Jameis Winston into a rhythm, and maintain balance throughout the football game. And if Kenny Stills, Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, Juwan Johnson, take your pick, if one of those guys can make a couple plays, that's going to boost Jameis Winston's confidence so much. I still think this is going to be a close, tight-knit game. Field position is going to be huge. But I like the Saints coming out of this with a 24-20 victory.
Yeah, I believe it's going to be low scoring as well, as we welcome in Kyle T. Mosley, editor, GM, the big boss man with the Saints News Network. But I think it's going to be a tight game as well.
I work for you, Brendan.
What was that?
I work for you.
Oh, I don't know about that. But I think it's going to be a tight game too, Bob. This is definitely not the Drew Brees and Tom Brady-esque type of Saints-Patriots matchup we've become accustomed to. I think Mac Jones, who's been super efficient, even though the touchdown numbers haven't been there, I think he's definitely going to have his hands full, and I think Marshawn Lattimore is going to make his life difficult, along with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And if the Saints don't run the ball effectively, listen, they're not going to have much success, not just in this game, but moving forward. So we got to see Kamara get into it. But I'm really high on what Tony Jones Jr. can do for this team moving forward, and he's going to be a big part of what the team has to do to win some football games. I'm going to take the Saints in this one, 21-14, real low scoring. Might get ugly at times, but it doesn't matter how ugly it is as long as you come out with the victory, and I think that's going to be the case today. Kyle, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for letting me be on with you. Wouldn't it be interesting if this becomes a high-scoring affair?
I think so.
Yeah, it would be kind of shocking. But look, I have my prediction is 27-20, the Saints over the Patriots. The offense has to go through Alvin Kamara. If it does not go through Alvin Kamara, if he doesn't get rolling in this game, it's going to be a long day offensively for the Saints. I think the elevation of Kenny Stills is highly important because the veteran knows how to be able to see those zones and also get behind the coverages in his day, right? So I know that he has some skins on the wall, but I saw what he did in Houston, Texas with the Texans, and I think he can still do the same and help out Jameis Winston. So I expect Stills to have a pretty good day, but the tight ends, Juwan Johnson as well as Adam Troutman, are going to have to do their due diligence and show up for this game.
Well, guys, we will be back at halftime. All of us have the Saints winning, but all of us have it not being a super high-scoring affair. We'll see if the Saints can bounce back from week number 2 and get back into the win column. You can follow all of our work over at the Saints News Network, si.com/NFL. www.getsaintsnews.com/Saints. And if you guys need something a little bit easier, because that can be tough to remember, just go to www.getsaintsnews.com. We'll see you right back here for halftime, and enjoy week number 3, Saints and Patriots. You can catch that on Fox.
Who that, baby?
Yeah.